the Knight Errant himself. Oh, have you been watching from the gallery, Mr. Soames? I've been on the edge of my seat the entire time. Courtroom trials are fascinating affairs, as a spectator at least. I'm glad you've been enjoying yourself. I have to ask, what on earth is going on? It makes no sense! What is this Professor business about? It doesn't look like any professor I've ever met before. Who even is he? Of course. You were in Germany already 10 years ago. Ah, yes, the professor. When I discovered he was the one who had been abducted, a sense of foreboding stirred within me. Who knew the monster would come knocking at your door? My heartfelt sympathies. As it turns out, Lord Von Zieks is even more intimately tied to this case than any of us realize, isn't he? Yes, how true. His great friend from university in the dark. And now a waxwork of the killer who took his esteemed brother's life makes an appearance too. I imagine even the shrewd Mr. Reaper failed to foresee that kick in the teeth. An extraordinary move on your part, my dear fellow, to throw that in front of the man. You make it sound deliberate. I can't help feeling that this professor case is really very puzzling. Oh yes? In what particular manner? Well, there's Mr. Drebber, Dr. Sith, and Lord Von Zieks. Seems that everybody in the trial has a link to the case somehow. Yes, in fact, I alone am not a member of the set. Though that leaves me as an empty set, all alone with no intersection to any other. Excuse me. Dr. Sith! Ah, Dr. Courtney Sith, nay, Stevens. Good day to you. Hello, Soames. That was very shrewd of you. What in particular, pray? You requested that 10-year-old autopsy report from Gregson, didn't you? Why would you assume such a thing? Because Gregson told me. To think it's been 10 years. 10 years in the laboratory, wielding my scalpel. Smell of nothing but corpses and disinfectant. Policemen on the jury had a lot to say about you as it happens, Dr. Sith. And I've accused you of being complicit in what happened. I'm hoping that you'll take the stand and tell the truth about what really happened. That certainly won't be possible. Lord Von Zieks won't be summoning me as a witness. Lord Strongheart has forbidden it. Lord Strongheart? The Pandora's box you were warned about is the Professor case. But please don't make the mistake of thinking you'll get any information about it out of me. But attempting to hide from the truth, that's cowardice! I've always fought crime in the way I see fit. I have no regrets. None at all. And that's all I came here to say. So, good day to you. She mentioned it too. This Pandora's box. Whatever does it all mean? There's really no cause for concern, I assure you, when the trial resumes. The meaning will become all too apparent, whether you'd like it or not. Huh? Now then, I believe it's almost time. I must make my way back to the public gallery. Here's my seat awaits! I think maybe you're enjoying yourself a little too much. Ah yes, one word of warning before I go. If, in the course of this trial this afternoon, you perceive even a shadow of doubt about the truth, don't let it out of your sight! Pursue it like a dog with a bone! To the bitter end, do you understand? Do not falter, whatever may come to pass. Alright, I understand. Thank you. Good, I shall make myself scarce then. I purchased a bar of caramel oil, so I shall be gnawing on that while you gnaw away at the truth. What did that warning from Mr. Sholmes really mean, I wonder? Especially the bit about whatever may come to pass. It's time for the final chapter then. I'm determined to find the truth, no matter what. In the name of Her Majesty the Queen, I hereby reconvene the proceedings of this court. Counsels for the defense and prosecution, are you ready and able to continue? The prosecution is ready, my lord. Yes, my lord. The defense is also ready. As the court is aware, the case under our scrutiny began with a damaging incident at the Great Exhibition. Yet we now find ourselves embroiled in the details of a convicted felon who was sent to the gallows a decade ago. This trial has certainly defied all expectation, as seems to be the fate of all trials in which this Nipponese is involved, my lord. So then, let us begin our exploration of the defence's assertion that the waxwork was cardinally involved in this matter. Lord von Zieks, my lord. Are we still awaiting the arrival of Madame Tuspel? Not at all. She is in the antechamber as we speak, and ready to be summoned. Very well. Bring in the witness! At once, my lord. Bailiff, show Madame Tuspel to the stand. Things are about to become a lot more intense. If Drebber is responsible, as I'm sure he is, it means he must have had an accomplice. And Dr. Sith. What connects the pair of them is the waxwork. Yes, the model of the professor. That's the key to the link between these otherwise unrelated individuals. It's a tenuous link, admittedly, but at present, that's all we have to go on. Oh. State your name and occupation for the court, please.
My name is Madame Esmeralda Tuspel. I am a waxwork artisan and the proprietress of the Madame Tuspel Museum of Waxwork. You will have to pardon me for working as I testify. My new exhibit must open very soon.
Oh, so he finally gets a statue, does he? Now there are two of them in the world.
Oh my, what expression is she carving on that face?
A number of days ago, a particular waxwork model was stolen from your museum. Can you confirm this?
Oui, that is true. At first, we believed it had been kidnapped.
A waxwork model? Kidnapped?
Yes, my lord. There was a demand for ransom money left behind by the culprit. However, according to what I have just been told outside the courtroom, that was not the true reason. I understand it was utilized as a substitute for the body of a murder victim.
At present, that is no more than conjecture proposed by the defense. This is the victim of the case in question, Mr. Odie Asman.
But of course, I know him well. He is a part of my odious personage exhibit. It's death to say that what is evident, but Mr. Asman does not resemble the professor at all.
Yes, but perhaps the faces are very similar.
Are you suggesting that we should see now the demasked visage of the professor? I have here the key, but it is strictly forbidden to open the lock.
This is absurd!
Pardon?
I don't know what face you've carved onto your fancy figure beneath that mask. But clearly, it won't be that of the actual killer. Indeed, the man's identity was never made public after all. The trial took place in a closed court. The proceedings were strictly confidential. The condemned man was summarily executed. His identity remains a closely guarded national secret. There is no possible way that a respiratory of tawdry exhibits could get his hands on that information.
Dear Tomas, it would seem you are unaware of the two-spell principle.
What principles?
The family two-spell has always prided itself on sculpting its models à la perfection. Every detail, including the visage, is fashioned with complete fidelity. Et voilà, our principles.
There is a well-known legend about the two-spell waxworks from the time of the French Revolution. A member of the two-spell family is said to have made a waxwork of the queen who was executed.
Oui, that is true. It was a century ago now.
I believe the queen's face was carved in the minutes following her death, actually at the guillotine site.
You are correct. The model is on display still today in the House of Orders. We two-spell will stop at nothing to obtain a faithful replica of our subjects.
Dear me, a somewhat disturbing tenacity of purpose.
It is the only way to obtain a true lifelike representation of the subject. And it has been my family's secret for generations.
Do you mean to say that beneath that mask?
Oui, the true visage of the killer is there.
This is ludicrous! It's out of the question!
The professor spread terror throughout Great Britain. As a result, the Madame Two-Spell special exhibit remains extremely popular even today. The killer, emerging from his own grave. It is a sight to behold. You should come.
I think, Madame, it would be beneficial to hear your formal testimony on this matter. You will explain every detail of this macabre model and your personal involvement in its creation.
With pleasure. The special exhibit in the House of Orders is based on a rumour that shocked society in London. An impression of the visage was taken directly from the corpse in accordance with Two-Spell family principles. I enlisted the aid of the gravedigger and created a mold from the head in the cemetery just before the interment. I hid myself until he gave me his signal. I was there for a very long time that night. As dawn approached, I was very worried that I could be discovered.
The gravedigger! The man sanctioned this!
Me, I would do all that is necessary to achieve the true resemblance my family is celebrated for. Nobody else knew, only the gravedigger. What harm did it do, huh?
So you truly saw it? The face of that monster!
Naturally, I was aware at the time that his identity was a secret. But Two-Spells would not be Two-Spell if we did not insist on absolute fidelity to our sculptures.
I don't believe this. I myself have seen the special exhibits at your museum, madame. A truly blood-curdling scene in which the murderer is emerging from his own grave. The scene it depicts was the subject of many rumours in London 10 years ago. I have here a newspaper from the time. The special exhibit was based upon the picture in this article. It was the most detailed account of what happened, as reported by the eyewitness who saw it. Man rises from the grave. It's too absurd for words. The public enjoys absurdity, monsieur. That is why I had reproduced the scene as carefully as possible in my museum. It's a waxwork from that exhibit that was stolen some days before the incident at the Great Exhibition, wasn't it? That is correct. The professor you see before you here. Most puzzling. Counsel for the defense, proceed with the cross-examination. This waxwork links Drebber to Dr. Sith. There has to be some reason for that, which hasn't yet come to light. But I'll find it. I'll get to the bottom of what really happened. Prove that Dr. Sith and Drebber were in on this crime together. Before we get to that though, I want to overlook our evidence. So, I suppose the front is just a summary of why we're here in trial. This is well done and dusted. Oh, there's more, but I'm not. This established that the height of the bird cage. This established the height of the bird cages, that there were two of them and they fell from a similar distance, same distance, whatnot. This proves that Green Balloon was involved with the body double stunt. This shot it. This proved that the kinesis was a trick. We don't know the actual cause of death. The murder weapon. Damage at the bottom. This is one of them. We don't know where the other one is, but we assume that the other landed is the other. The other one is the one that landed head first. There we go. Drebber. This proved that the waxwork was used in the stunt because it had the crystal tower fragment on its person, if you want to call it that. This has blood on it, or some red stain rather. What's going on there? I'm not sure why we took this, but okay. This connects Sith to the waxwork. And Drebber is also depicted in that special exhibit. So both of them have some special connection. Again, another part of the kinesis charade. The lack of motive. And this. Alright, now that we've gone over the evidence, let's see. A rumor. Bruh, that's... Ew. The aid of the gravedigger. Who is this gravedigger? I hid myself for a long time. Alright, I'm going to press. Hold it! And that rumor would be a 10-year-old tale now.
but one that no Londoner would ever forget.
Oh, right, I know just what you're talking about, I think.
Of course, it couldn't be anything else. Yes, that story will never disappear. The tale of the condemned killer rising from the dead. That is the central attraction of my House of Horrors. The rumor was whispered all over the city, and it was like this.
It was in Lowgate Cemetery behind the prison, in the dead of night after the execution of the killer. The interred professor slid back from the stone slab covering his tomb and emerged from his grave. A young man who witnessed this felt a scream welling up inside him. But an instant later, he heard an ear-splitting gunshot from over his shoulder. The bullet struck the emerging corpse. He fell motionless once more. The scream finally found its way from the mouth of the young witness, who turned and ran for his life. The corpse climbed out of his own grave, and then somebody shot him? Who was it?
Nobody knows, even today. But remember, it was just a rumor. Perhaps nothing more than a ghost story. The good people of London, they love stories like this. That is why that is in every newspaper across the capital.
But was it just a story? I mean, this is exactly the scene that can be seen today at your museum, isn't it?
Oui, the special exhibit was modelled on that very illustration. For a while afterwards, the contents of the article were reproduced in every newspaper imaginable.
Madame, might I say something?
Please, go ahead, mademoiselle.
When something is described as a rumour, it doesn't necessarily mean it's entirely made up. I believe that often, rumours contain elements of the truth.
I see that people from the East can be just as astute as the people of Europe.
Can we be sure, for instance, that the professor's execution was successful?
It is not possible for the dead to come back to life.
Sorry?
10 years ago, I was there in Lowgate Cemetery, after the criminal known as the Professor was killed by hanging. I took a waxwork impression of his visage from the corpse just before he was interred. So I can assure you, the man was dead.
I see. It would certainly appear that the condemned man suffered the intended fate.
An impression of the visage was taken directly from the corpse, in accordance with the Duspel family principles.
Hold it! Is that true of every waxwork in your museum then?
It is, assuming the subject is dead, of course. Live subjects have to cooperate in a similar way. I have letters from imprisoned criminals all the time, you know.
What sort of letters?
When my time comes, please make a waxwork of me. Comme ça.
Whoa!
The museum is famous, monsieur. To be made into a waxwork is an honor, and for some criminals, a symbol of status even.
Because nothing says hardened criminals better than wax.
And it is thanks to one killer in particular that my museum has gained popularity in London. I refer to the star of the special exhibit, of course, the Professor.
Whose form you claim to have captured by taking an impression from the actual corpse.
There are no exceptions to the principles of Duspel. I enlisted the aid of the gravedigger and created a mold.
Hold it! Surely that's illegal, isn't it? It would seem the proprietress of this repository of novelties was blinded by monetary greed.
He had nothing to do with money. The man is part of London's criminal history. That is why I had to sculpt him, to record this history. It is the raison d'etre of the Dispel Museum.
But if the man was convicted in a closed court and sent for immediate execution, then surely nobody but the members of the judiciary present know the killer's true identity.
I assure you, behind that mask is hidden the true face of the professor.
Do you realize what you're saying? The professor's identity is a national secret!
I understand. And now that the truth about the special exhibit has been revealed, it must perhaps close.
Of course it will. As will your entire museum if you don't tread very carefully, madame.
That could be another interesting chapter in the history of my family, I think, don't you?
So 10 years ago, on the night of the professor's execution, you took a wax impression of his face from the corpse.
Oui, exactement. I hid myself until he gave me a signal. I was there for a very long time that night.
Hold it!
You were there longer than you expected to be.
I had some difficulties in capturing the subject's form correctly. As I removed the mask, the mouth of the cadaver fell open, and I had some problems with the chin.
Dare I ask?
The man had been dead for a short while already, you see. His muscles were relaxing, and consequently, his chin would not align itself correctly.
Oh dear, what a horrible thought!
Under normal circumstances, I would have an assistant with me. However, that night I was alone, and as a consequence, I missed my preferred window of time.
What do you mean?
When I take the impression of the visage of a cadaver, I always wait until 3 hours after death.
Why 3 hours? Is that amount of time significant?
It is because of rigor mortis.
A Wrigley Mortis?
It's a name given to a phenomenon that occurs in recently deceased bodies.
As a rule, 3 hours post-death, the muscles in the body begin to stiffen. By approximately 10 hours post-death, the entire body is completely rigid and inflexible. And then from that point on, the muscles slowly start to revert to their relaxed state. The effect is often used to estimate the time of death when a body is discovered. Well, that was an education, if a slightly scary one.
As the mademoiselle says, rigor mortis commences 3 hours after death, and it starts in the jaw.
I see. So that's why you wait.
Before that time, the mouth falls open, and it is very difficult to do my work.
It's getting hard for me to do my work with all this talk of corpses. I wonder about the information the court just heard from Madame Tuspel. No harm. The information about rigor mortis that you just shared with us. Would you mind including it in your formal testimony? I believe it could be significant, you see.
Of course, I do not mind at all.
I can't help feeling that after this latest topic, the atmosphere in the courtroom has become extremely grave. This is no time for jokes, Mr. Subtle! Madame, kindly amend your testimony as discussed.
Bien sûr. It took me a very long time because it was before the onset of rigor mortis.
Okay. Rigor mortis being the phenomenon you described whereby the corpse becomes stiff after death. Hey, if... I think you said that it starts at the jaw about 3 hours post-death. Is that correct?
Oui, c'est ça. Of course, the exact duration happens a little on the season.
Or depends. I didn't think a waxwork artisan would be so well versed in the subject.
Oh, no, that is only elementary knowledge in the field of legal medicine.
Well, I had no idea about it. Maybe I won't admit my ignorance about forensic science.
I could ask my father to give you a very simple primer if you'd like.
I think corpses should be your domain. I'm not good with them.
Oh dear, I do my very best. As dawn approached, I was very worried that I could be discovered. Dawn?
Hold it!
You say that dawn was approaching. What was the time of day then, approximately?
Well, I could not say. But when I left the cemetery with my utensils and wax, the morning light was becoming visible.
The execution took place on 17th of June, which had the earliest sunrise of that year.
Indeed it did.
First light would have been around 4:40 in the morning. It really is early.
The fact is, I had very little time, so I finished my work in about half an hour. It was necessary to complete the impression and bury the body before daybreak, of course. If somebody had discovered me there, it would have been a catastrophe, so I had to hurry.
Is it me, or does Mr. Sholmes seem to be taking shape more quickly now too? You certainly appear to go to extraordinary lengths for your work, madame. I wonder, is what she's just said particularly significant? Madame, those details about how long it took you to complete the sculpture and the early sunrise, could you include them in your testimony? I believe they may be significant.
Of course, if you would like me to.
You're quite right, Mr. Naruhodo. It is intriguing. A sunrise at 4 in the morning would be absolutely unimaginable at home, wouldn't it? That's not quite what I meant by significant. Kindly amend your formal testimony then, madame.
With pleasure, my lord.
I hurried in the half hour before sunrise, then I left as soon as the corpse was interred. Okay. So, the body stiffens 3 hours after death, I think she said. The time of death, let's see, midnight. This is odd.
Objection!
Fuck! Oh, at least my penalties have been restored. That last statement would seem to be at odds somehow with the evidence. It is your task, counsel, to explain the somehows, not the other way around. Whatever. Hold on a second. It shouldn't have been. It should have been stiff. If he died at midnight, then it should have been stiff by the time you got to him.
Objection!
Okay, so I did the wrong statement. Oh my god. Madame Tuspel, I have here an autopsy report that was filed 10 years ago now. It confirms the death of the professor following his execution at the gallows.
And is that a problem?
I believe it is, because your testimony and a particular detail in the report completely contradict one another.
Quoi?
Are you going to explain yourself, my Nipponese friend? According to her testimony, Madame Tuspel was creating a wax impression just before dawn. And at that time, rigor mortis had not yet set in. Am I correct so far, Madame?
You are, yes. As I said, the stiffening of the jaw is the first sign of rigor mortis. 2 to 3 hours after death. The man's chin was limp, so he cannot have been dead for a long time.
But on the other hand, if you look at Dr. Sith's report, it quite clearly states the following. Death by hanging confirmed at midnight, 17th of June. No! If the professor indeed died at midnight that day, then by the time you were sculpting his face, rigor mortis would have already set in.
Yes, you are right. The chin, it would have been completely stiff.
In other words, this report is wrong.
Objection.
No, coroner makes mistakes when recording the time of death. The very idea is absurd. In that case, there's only one possible conclusion. The execution didn't actually take place at the stated time. Impossible! Order! Counsel, this is beyond folly! Not only do you indict the author of the report, Dr. Sith, but you also implicate members of staff at Barclay Prison where the execution took place! Why, heck! Extraordinary! Not in my day! My learned friend appears to have overlooked one very crucial fact. What fact? The professor died that night, without question.
He did. Of course he did. I moved the man's limp jaw with my own hands. There was no...
Yes, the professor died that night. But what if he didn't die at the gallows? Didn't die at... Are you insane? What exactly are you suggesting happened that night? It's almost impossible to believe, but it would explain the link between Dr. Sith, the professor, and that one other person of interest. I have evidence that will explain exactly what I'm suggesting happened that night. Counsel, present the evidence at once! The evidence that allegedly explains what really happened. What really happened? This is just a depiction of a witness account. That's today. Science trophy. It's gotta be this. It was another piece of the exhibit that depicted the events of 10 years ago. But let me double check everything else. Make sure I don't.
Take that!
What have we here?
Objection.
Before considering the night of the execution, I would strongly advise to concentrate on what is happening right now in this corporate shit. Did I not update it? Or am I completely off the mark? No, I did, boy! What? You may find that tonight is the night of your own execution. What? Great, I'm so looking forward to trying again now. I won't let anyone execute you, Mr. Nuttlehoodle. Not tonight. What really happened? The gunshot.
Take that!
Okay, there we go. What happened that night is written very plainly in this newspaper article. Executed criminal returns in the dead of night at local cemetery. You're suggesting it was a corpse coming back from the dead now? Well, if this article is to be believed, yes. The professor, assumed dead following his execution, emerged from his grave and was killed again.
Objection!
Don't be a fool! That's simply a rumor published by the gutter press! Can you be certain of that? Are you serious? point is, as the article says, there was a witness to what happened. My word! Yes, indeed!
Mary! The young man who stole into the cemetery by chance that night!
Objection!
Of course there was a witness! The story didn't write itself, but obviously the man made it all up! And in any case, this was 10 years ago now. There would surely be no hope of finding him.
Objection!
Au contraire. On the contrary, my lord, we all know this witness very well. What? Are you suggesting, counsel, that you've identified the person in question? You know who claims to have seen these utterly incredible events taking place? Yes, my lord. You were at the exhibit, so you say. In fact, you could say he's right here before my very eyes. You will substantiate your last claim now then, counsel. Who was the alleged witness of this staggering scene from the cemeteries 10 years ago? If I have to spell it out for you.
Take that!
The man in question is Mr. Enoch Drabble. Drabble! The previous witness! Special exhibit in the House of Horrors at Madame Tussauds Museum of Waxwork. Recreates that decade-old scene in great detail. The condemned criminal emerging from the grave, and beside the tomb, a young man with a lantern stumbling upon the terrifying sight. And that young man is a 10-year younger Mr. Enoch Drabble. Order! Surely not, counsel. Drabble was there, in Lowgate Cemetery.
What is all this talk about Mr. Drabble? Is the name significant?
Of course, Madame Tussauds doesn't know, does she? Yes, it's extremely significant, Madame. To your situation as well, in fact.
What situation?
The theft of the Professor Waxwork from your museum some days ago was perpetuated by the very same man.
No! But that would mean...
Madame Tussauds. It would appear you know the name, Enoch Drabble.
Yes, I knew it. From long ago in the past.
What? Oh my! Good gracious! Explain yourself! Tell us everything you know!
Yes, of course. The story of the young man and the terrible sight he witnessed in the cemetery 10 years ago was published in every single newspaper in London and throughout Great Britain. However, in all of the articles, the witness was simply described as a certain young man. No details were published about his identity. His name was never revealed. That is, apart from in one newspaper. The Daily Circus. It is the paper from which comes the article I have already shown the court.
You're saying that his full name was only publicized in that article? Goodness me! Yes, here it is! The university student who experienced this shocking event is Mr. Enoch Drabble, a disciple of science at the University of London and a resident of its student dorms. Unbelievable.
When I read the article, I wanted to meet with the man. His discovery of the condemned criminal coming back to life in the cemetery in the dead of night would make a perfect exhibit for my House of Horrors, whether it was truth or not.
I see. So you went to meet Mr. Drabble in order to sculpt a waxwork of the man, did you?
Exactement. He was studying science at the University of London in those days. He was just a poor student. I paid him about £5 to model for the waxwork. And since that time, it has been in my museum to recreate the scene of terror from the cemetery.
So, 10 years ago, a young man appealed to the public about an extraordinary event he witnessed. A criminal who had been put to death, re-emerging from his grave in the middle of the night. But the public treated his claim as nothing more than an amusing anecdote that was soon forgotten. 10 years later, the same man steals a waxwork model of the executed criminal, ostensibly to be used as a body double for the victim in the case we're discussing here today. Even though the waxwork's build is a poor match for the victim, and his face is obscured by a mask. So the question is, why would the man do such a thing? Which brings us to 3 days ago, when the birdcage crashed into the Crystal Tower. If the birdcage had in fact contained not the body of Mr. Asman, but that same waxwork, the coroner from Scotland Yard who investigated, Dr. Sith, would have noticed immediately. And yet, she submitted this autopsy report for the victim, which the court has seen earlier. Why? Because the waxwork was that of the professor, is that what you're saying? Dr. Sith put her name to a document confirming the death of a condemned criminal who was still alive. A criminal whose apparent resurrection was witnessed by Mr. Drebber. But that misconduct was a deadly secret the coroner would do anything to protect. Which is precisely why Mr. Drebber used that particular waxwork as the body double. Ah! My lord, this court must summon Dr. Sith to the stand. The defense is determined to find out exactly how the coroner and Mr. Drebber are connected. But according to the missive I received this morning through the prosecutor's office, Dr. Sith is unable to participate in these proceedings. Is that not the case? She told us herself, didn't she? Lord Von Zeeks won't be summoning me as a witness. Lord Strongheart has forbidden it. Lord Strongheart? The Pandora's box you were warned about is the Professor case. But please don't make the mistake of thinking you'll get any information about it out of me. Something happened on the night of that killer's execution 10 years ago. And surely nobody would want to get to the bottom of that more than Lord Von Zeeks. The prosecution calls for the instructions in that missive to be scrapped. But Lord Von Zeeks, the missive was issued from the Lord Chief Justice's office.
Objection!
The assigned prosecutor has the final say on policy in any particular trial. In other words, me. Yes. Let Enoch Drebber and Dr. Sith both take the stand together. Order! Very well, I will uphold your request. Bailiff, send a subpoena with immediate effect addressed to Dr. Sith of the Forensic Investigation Team. The woman is compelled to attend on Her Majesty's orders. Alright then, Enoch Drebber and Dr. Sith. If they weren't colluding with one another, this crime could have never been committed. I'm just a stone's throw away. I can feel it. The truth behind all of this is about to come out. thank you for your attendance at such notice, Dr. Sith. I'm disappointed in you, Lord Von Zieks. You've completely betrayed the agreed policy of both Scotland Yard and the prosecutor's office. Betrayal is not in my nature, as long as the truth isn't compromised. If it is, if there's even a hint of wrongdoing, no matter whom it concerns or disgruntles, I will pursue the matter to the bitter end, as would any prosecutor worth his salt. Mr. Drebber, you took the victim's life by means of a machine that you constructed in your workshop. And Dr. Sith, as the investigating coroner, you were the first on the scene to examine the victim's body. It is the belief of the defense that you collaborated with each other and were both complicit in this crime. Where's your evidence? At present, we have no definitive evidence, but we do have a very significant clue. What are you talking about? I'm talking, of course, about the waxwork. This model of the killer known as the Professor, who was sentenced to death 10 years ago. You don't need to tell me. I witnessed the man's execution with my own eyes and officially pronounced him dead. That remains to be seen. Is that so? According to the newspaper reports from the time, on the night following his execution, the killer came back to life. Don't waste my time. The sole witness to that mysterious event was you, Mr. Drebber, wasn't it? If what you saw in the graveyard that night 10 years ago wasn't some chilling fiction, but reality, it would make you privy to a very great secret of Dr. Sith's. A secret so profound it could compel the coroner to agree to collaborate in your evil scheme, in fact. Mr. Drebber, tell the court. Tell everyone the truth of what you saw that night. So he was the student who saw it. You can see the resemblance actually, can't you? With the man in Madame Tussauds, I mean. Surely he's not going to claim that's really what he saw, especially not after all these years. He was a research student at the University of London, wasn't he? A bit too clever for his own good, if you ask me. What an interesting twist. When at the time, not one person would take me seriously. Yet now here we are, 10 years later, and suddenly my story matters, and in a court of law too. Very well then, if everyone so wishes. Let's be frank. I'll tell you the truth of what happened that night, for what it's worth. So, Mr. Drebber, your testimony, please, about the events of that night 10 years ago. You will tell the court exactly what you stumbled across in Lowgate Cemetery. Yes, of course, as you wish. The reason I was in Lowgate Cemetery at all 10 years ago was for a spot of moonlighting, shall we say. Yes, the illustration in that newspaper article was based on what I witnessed that night. But thinking back now, I realized that I never actually saw the Professor. Soon afterwards,
I was visited by a young woman who sculpted a model of me from wax. And I gave up on my dream of becoming a scientist. It was all because of that newspaper article.
Wait a minute! You're claiming you didn't actually see the professor now?
Of course, you'd have to have a screw loose if you believed a corpse could come back from the dead.
So you're saying this article is...
Not worth the paper it's printed on. I think that would best describe it. Yes.
Ah!
The details in the article aren't true.
It nullifies your argument for why Mr. Drebber and Dr. Sith would have been working together. So he's discrediting himself to cripple my argument. Tell me, witness. You claim to have been in the cemetery on some auxiliary business. Can you elaborate?
That's right. Grave robbing, to be precise. As you know, no gay cemetery is at the real Barclay prison. So among students at the university, it had a reputation for being haunted by the ghosts of condemned convicts.
Grave robbing, you say?
Yes. Exhuming fresh corpses to sell is reasonably lucrative. Of course, I never laid a finger on any valuables buried with the dead.
So you were one of the so-called resurrectionists, a particularly unpleasant scourge on society.
Actually, my fellows and I went by another name. The Repurposes.
That is quite beyond the pale. You wouldn't invite divine retribution, sir.
Yes, well, I think I suffered retribution enough. The Daily Circus eventually unearthed my name and put it in the print. It caused me a great many headaches. In the end, I had to leave the university. That was the only paper with the bad grace to identify me unambiguously, I might add.
I see. Out of interest, who drew the illustration for this article?
Ah yes, it was the reporter who exposed me. He sketched that right in front of me as I described the scene. Obviously, as time ticked on, I bitterly regretted what I'd done. Claiming to have seen something I never truly saw. Foolish. Very foolish.
Well, counsel for the defense, you may proceed to the cross-examination now. At once, my lord.
The reason I was in no gay cemetery at all 10 years ago was for a spot of moonlighting, shall we say. Yes, the illustration in that newspaper article was based on. I realised that I never actually saw the professor at all, though.
Hold it!
What are you talking about?
I think I explained already, didn't I? Lowgate Cemetery is at the rear of Barclay Prison, so it was renowned among us students at the university for being haunted by the ghosts of condemned convicts. For some absurd reason, I was scared of the graveyard at night, and as a result, only too willing to believe that nonsense about the dead coming back to life.
But you said you actually saw it!
I said what I'd seen in my mind's eye. After all, resurrection is impossible, isn't it? You'd have to be unhinged to think otherwise. Unless, of course, you have some evidence that proves I encountered the professor that night.
I don't know. Is there any material evidence that could show he really did see the professor?
Do we have anything at all, Mr. Naruhodo?
Oh no, I need to present it against that irritatingly backtracking statement of his!
The point is, that night was a pivotal moment in my life.
Soon afterwards, I was visited by a young woman who sculpted a model for me. Oh my god, sorry. That young woman being Madame Tussauds, of course.
Precisely. I must say, I didn't expect to run into her again like this 10 years later. As I have explained, I went by the name published in the article, and comme ça, I found the name man.
Yes, the article in the Daily Circus, I think you said.
I was a poor student with barely a penny to my name at the time. And the young lady put £5 in front of me.
So you readily consented to having a waxwork of yourself made and gave permission for it to be put on display.
I did. I should see what little I had to sell, I concluded. Ah oui, I remember now. I purchased something else from you that day, n'est-ce pas?
Did you? I can't say I remember. What was it, Madame?
His camera.
Oh. Oh yes, I made a point of taking it with me whenever I made an excursion into any cemetery. You took a camera with you, sir. To what end? To record the details of the bodies I disinterred. But I had no intention of ever visiting a graveyard again after that night, so I sold it. I see.
But I still have it, monsieur. It is part of the special exhibits in my house of orders. I am very meticulous about such details. It is the Tussauds way.
It would seem then that this is the very camera Mr. Drebber took with him to Logate Cemetery on the night in question. Interesting. Then I gave up on my dream of becoming a scientist, and it was all because of that newspaper article.
Hold it!
This article, you mean? Published in the Daily Circus? Yes. Somebody informed the Dean that it was my name that appeared in the article. I carelessly let slip that night after night I was digging up graves. Hardly a model student, you might say. The university's reputation was execrably defiled, and I was expelled as a result.
Mon Dieu, I had no idea.
And having been run out of the university, you found employment in a somewhat specialist trade. You combine your knowledge of science with knowledge of stage magic to create various experimental machines intended to demonstrate never-before-seen technology. And you use those deceptive machines to trick the government and private investors into giving you money. Professor Albert Harebrain was just your latest victim, wasn't he?
Whatever are you talking about? I have no recollection of doing anything of the sort.
What's Drebber up to? Why would he suddenly change his tune and recant his claim? I wonder if perhaps it's because his circumstances have changed now. What circumstances? Well, if he admits to have seen the professor emerging alive from his grave 10 years ago, it will expose a secret in Dr. Sith's past that she would desperately want to hide. Of course. If Drebber and Dr. Sith are working together now, then if Drebber were to betray her, there would be no reason for her to continue to cooperate. In that case, there's only one way around it. I have to prove he really did see it. Prove he really did see the professor's corpse coming back from the dead as he originally claimed.
Yes, Mr. Naruhodo, exactly.
Alright, I'm going to shoot my shot here because... Okay, so the professor emerged and then he was shot. He was shot. Did blood get on the camera?
Objection!
Or not? Surely something about that last segment seems odd, doesn't it? Would you care to mull over precisely what you find odd about it? I wouldn't be back to give the court an answer for about 4 months, though. Rest assured, we should be happy to carry proceedings forward in your absence, counsel. Sounds serious. Oh, right. Whatever. Ah! By moonlighting, you mean grave robbing, do you?
Surely you only need to look at the graveyard scene and my appearance to gauge the answer to that.
The lantern and spade. But who on earth would want to buy a dead body? Any major hospital. A hospital? In order to better understand the human body, the study of anatomy is crucial to medical science. But there isn't a hospital in the world that has enough specimens to work with. Though obviously they can't openly express an interest in obtaining more by dubious means.
As aspiring scientists, we young research students had no money to work with, as I'm sure you can imagine. So we made surreptitious arrangements with a hospital via some of my medical student acquaintances. We would never take anything of value from the graves. It was all for the furtherance of science, you see. That's what we told ourselves every time we stole into the graveyard at night, spade in hand.
You realise body snatching is a serious crime. If you were caught, you could expect the gravest of consequences.
We students were caught between the hammer and the anvil. We needed funds for research. Professor Harebrain said exactly the same.
Quite speechless at the apparent levity with which you've revealed this abhorrent behaviour.
Well, if you wanted to know why I was there at Lowgate Cemetery, that's the reason. I never expected it to end the way that it did. That I regret to this day. Yes, the illustration in that newspaper article was based on what I witnessed that night.
Hold it!
The strange happening at Lowgate Cemetery, with which you now deny.
Not entirely. I ran to fetch the police at the time, you know. I was shaking like a leaf. But they didn't believe a word of it. In fact, I was very nearly arrested myself.
So you went to the papers instead?
I started big with the London News. But surprisingly, they didn't want to know either. In the end, though, it was reporters from the gossip press, the gutter press that came to get my story. It spread like the plague through the capital, as gossip-hungry Londoners lapped up the tale.
The story was in every single paper at the time, with the exception of some broadsheets.
And yet only 2 or 3 of them actually interviewed me personally. Most of the accounts turned out to be very interpretive ghost stories.
What about the article in the Daily Circus?
That particular journalist found me at my dormitory. I don't know how, but he discovered my name. So I recounted to him exactly what happened that night.
And from your description, he drew this illustration.
Precisely. That's how I learned that the condemned man was the infamous professor. Because the reporter told me so. I had no idea myself, you see.
Newspaper reporters are wont to snoop around in matters that don't concern them. So the scene portrayed in the illustration is accurate then?
Well.
Oh. Never saw the professor. It's awfully detailed. Never mind. Sorry, Mr. Trevor, but I don't believe that.
Don't believe what?
Your latest claim. You did see the professor on that night 10 years ago.
see. We seem to be at odds. But I was then, and you were not. I know what I didn't see.
The illustration with this article was drawn based on what you told the journalist that you witnessed. A figure emerging from a tomb, wearing an iron mask. Yes, when the killer was tried 10 years ago, it was decided in the closed court's ruling that the man would wear the mask to hide his identity. It wasn't to be removed even during his execution and subsequent burial. Not even the prison wardens were to see the man's face. But obviously, the provision of this mask was not public knowledge. So, Mr. Drebber, as you've just heard, a lowly student of the University of London certainly wouldn't have known about the condemned man's mask. So unless you'd actually seen the professor that night, it's inconceivable that the artist would have included the mask in that illustration. Order! Whoa, Mr. Drebber.
It's a vile scene, isn't it? If you look closely. And as I've already been at pains to point out, I was utterly petrified. Which is why I had it in my head that I had seen such a blood-curdling sight. But afterwards, I came to my senses and realized that I had been mistaken.
You're still saying that you didn't see it? If you're stubbornly sticking to that story, witness, then amend your testimony to explain exactly how you think your eyes deceived you.
Of course. Only too happy to oblige.
I can't believe he's still not going to concede to the point. Fellow grave robber, what are you talking about?
Well, I wasn't the only one busy in the cemetery that night, you know. Other body snatchers were at work. Of course, when I saw one emerging from the hole he dug, my heart very nearly stopped. So that's the terrifying sight I actually saw, you see.
You're claiming it was just another student on an equally insalubrious business as yourself.
Many of the medical students would wear metal masks to protect them from bacteria during dissections. Clearly, the fellow was using such a mask to protect his anonymity, wouldn't you say?
Objection!
But there's more to the story, isn't there? The article goes on to say, in the next second, a gunshot rang out suddenly from behind. The bullet pierced the resurrected man's chest, whose breath then stilled once more. You might assume that the sexton discovered the miscreants at work, perhaps, and fired upon one of them. If a gravedigger had shot someone in the cemetery, I think it might have been rather big news, my lord.
Yes, well, I can only assume it was an embellishment bolted on later by the reporter.
Excuse me.
Madame to smell. Don't take it out on Mr. Sholmes.
Oh la la, pardon. I was lost in my thoughts.
Would it be fair to say that Mr. Drebber's last remark was significant to you in some way?
I thought it was a little strange, that's all. How Monsieur Drebber could claim this now.
If you don't mind me saying, madame, what are you talking about?
Well, when I met you 10 years ago at your university dormitory, you recounted to me about your adventures in the cemetery, no? Including the gunshot.
Stop!
You might want to watch your tongue, you know.
Objection!
Have a care, Drebber. That's no way to speak to a lady. Please, madame, carry on.
Of course. According to what Monsieur Jabber told me at the time, he did hear a gunshot from behind him, and the bullet hit the condemned man.
I said nothing of the sort.
No, you were very explicit about the details. About the mask that the figure was wearing. And the blood that spattered over you when he was shot.
Enough! Shut up, woman! You're making all this up! That will do! Mr. Drebble.
Yes.
You refute the account just given by Madame Tusspel.
I have no recollection of ever saying those things.
Oh, come on! Do you really expect us to believe you? Control yourself, counsel. I will not permit baseless accusations in my courtroom. Right. Under the circumstances, I think it best that you supplement your testimony with a statement to clarify your position on this witness.
Very well.
There was no gunshot from behind me at all, nor any splattering of blood. Yet Madame Tusspel has testified that you told her about both of those details.
Not true. I said nothing of the sort.
10 years have passed. Without material evidence to the contrary, you have no grounds on which to question the witness's word. Tell me, madame. What exactly did Mr. Drebber say about the blood that apparently spattered on him?
Hello, this is what he told me. All of a sudden, he heard a very loud gunshot from behind his back. The bullet hit the figure which was emerging from the tomb in the middle of the chest, and his hat.
One dreadful sight after another.
Since Monsieur Jabber was at the time facing towards the condemned man, the blood sprayed from the wound and spattered on his body. That is what he told me.
So, not an experience you would ever forget, is it?
Precisely, and I didn't forget it, because, as I've already said, it never happened in the first place.
He's clearly lying. If only I had some evidence to prove it. We can't let him win, Mr. Noddlehoodle. We mustn't overlook a single detail, no matter how small.
Objection!
Mr. Drebber, do you remember this camera?
That is the camera from the fateful night.
Yes, we borrowed it from the House of Horrors. It's the camera you took with you to the cemetery that night, Mr. Drebber.
And is that supposed to be significant?
This kind of camera is rarely seen in our homeland, so my colleague and I were keen to examine it closely. We noticed that the lens extends forward on the camera at the end of some bellows. Like this.
Hold it!
What's that? There! Just on the bellows! It looks like a dark red stain! That's right. It's a rather conspicuous marquee on the bellows, in fact.
Good Lord, are you suggesting?
Yes, my lord. It would appear to be a spatter of blood. Something that could be confirmed with a simple chemical test. Isn't that right, Dr. Sith? It would be difficult to determine if it was human and not the human blood and not the blood of some animal. But yes, to testify whether or not it's blood at all is simple enough. I propose that Madame Tusspel's testimony was correct, and that on the night in question 10 years ago, you were splattered with blood from the gunshot wound. And that furthermore, you really did witness the condemned professor emerging from his tomb! Ah! There's simply no way you could have forgotten such a traumatic experience. In other words, the only explanation is that you're trying to hide the fact that you saw the professor that night.
Objection!
But why? Why would he want to do that? Well, not for his own gain, it would seem. For whose then? Who could benefit? Mr. Drebber is obviously lying in order to protect somebody. Goodness, he's shielding someone. Yes, my lord. Clearly, it's someone who doesn't want the truth about the professor's coming back to life to be exposed. The furtive glance. Well, counsel, who is it then? Who is this witness trying to protect by lying?
Take that!
The obvious answer is Dr. Sith. Sith? Whatever do you mean? Imagine if the convict who'd been sentenced to death was not in fact killed. Imagine if that was to come to light. What are you insinuating? And imagine if the convict in question was the country's most hated mass murderer. If it was the professor. That would be an unprecedented scandal!
Objection!
This is beyond a joke! Need I point out the dead cannot come back to life? What you're suggesting would mean that the execution never actually happened! Yes, that's exactly what it would mean.
Objection!
Once a man is sent to the gallows, he hangs. No one could escape. Not in Great Britain.
Objection!
But the fact is, there was a witness to the fact that the man did escape his hanging. If that were really true, counsel, the implications of misconduct would not stop at the supervising coroner. It would taint the honor of the entire judiciary from the ground up. And it's exactly because of those monumental repercussions that Dr. Sith would consent to any demand made of her by someone who threatened to expose the secret, even if that meant being complicit in a crime. You mean? I mean that Dr. Sith wasn't collaborating in Mr. Drebber's wicked scheme. She was coerced into collaborating in order to protect her decade-old secret. She switched the dead body of Mr. Asman with the waxwork model and fabricated the autopsy report. How did you not kid Kenji? Lord Von Zeeks! Pray forgive my freshly hallowed chalice, a whole raft of other discourtesies now? It's been a long trial, do forgive the discourtesy. It's just the sort of tall tale that Londoners would enjoy, I grant you. An executed killer rising from the dead, Scotland Yard cover-up, a conspiracy at the highest levels. So let me ask you one thing. If the condemned man really did emerge from his tomb that night, only to be shot in the chest, who pulled the trigger and disposed of him forever? I have no idea at the moment. I wasn't there. We have too little information to work on that out at present, I think. I couldn't agree more. The Old Bailey is no place for wild fantasies. And have you considered this, my learned Nipponese friend? Considered what? Do you realize just what a dangerous endeavor it would be to coerce this woman into such criminal activity? It's tantamount to declaring war on the entire British police force and judiciary. Quite hard to imagine any sum of money being offered for research could warrant it. To rely on some strange deception when so much is at stake would be madness. I suppose. And this was no petty crime either. The victim was murdered. A man who'd already invested money in the venture and would be instrumental in future profits too.
Yes, I had no reason to kill Mr. Asman at all. Or are you forgetting that his death results in me receiving not a single penny?
Not everybody's motivated by money.
The court is already aware of the contract between myself and the victim, no?
There is a contract, that's very true. The motive for this case runs deep, though. I can feel it. Using threats to force the head of the forensic investigation team to cooperate is extreme. Especially for a government grant he had no guarantee of receiving in the first place. If the research grant was the aim, taking Mr. Asman's life would have made no sense anyway. Which means Mr. Drebber's motive wasn't money at all. He was just trying to kill Mr. Asman. Why? What was his motive then? Your time is up, my learned friend. I'd say you have one last chance before the jury lose their patience with this charade. Let us see if we can back up your heady proposal, shall we? Ooh. How do you explain why this engineer would throw all caution to the wind and threaten his own country? At this point, I'm not prepared to listen to more of this outlandish conjecture without proof. So, counsel, present your evidence. Alright, who exactly was Mr. Asman to Drebber? There's a connection there that no one's seen yet. I'm going to have to present 2 pieces of evidence to show what it is. Yes, my lord. The evidence that establishes a motive and explains why the witness wanted the victim dead is right here. Evidence number 1.
Take that!
It's this newspaper article, my lord. It was written 10 years ago, and every detail has been examined already. What can it possibly tell us?
That drivel should have never been written. It's typical gutter press nonsense that means nothing.
Yes, on its own, it isn't particularly significant. However, when considered alongside another piece of evidence, it will completely explain your motive for wanting Mr. Asman dead. What other evidence? Let me get to it! Counsel, you will present your supplementary evidence without delay. I need to go through all these text boxes. The evidence! Oh wait, where is the thing? Yeah, this. Is this contract, my lord? Mr. Drebber, this is the contract you signed with Mr. Asman.
Yes, that's right. The very document, in fact. That proves I had no reason to kill the man.
I'm afraid not. What? There's something very significant that this newspaper article and the contract have in common. Really. And it's that common link that shows very clearly why you were determined to kill Mr. Odie Asman. Seems the defense has uncovered something the rest of us have missed. So, my learned friend, point out what these 2 pieces of evidence have in common. Alright. With pleasure.
Take that!
What these 2 pieces of evidence have in common. is a signature.
A signature?
The signature on the illustration that accompanies the 10-year-old article and the signature on the contract belong to the same person.
What?
As the court has heard, this illustration was drawn 10 years ago by the newspaper reporter who found Mr. Drebber and interviewed him about this ordeal. If you look closely, the reporter's signature can be seen in the bottom right corner of the drawing. And if you look at the contract here, which was signed between the witness and the victim last year, you can clearly see Mr. Asman's signature at the bottom.
Let me see them. Good Lord, yes! They're identical!
In short, the journalist who drew the illustration and wrote the article published about Mr. Drebber 10 years ago was the victim of this case, Mr. Odie Asman.
Objection!
But explain to the court why! Why would that constitute a motive for the witness to murder Asman? Well, if you think back, you'll remember that Mr. Drebber talked about that article in this testimony.
Grave robbing, you say? Yes, exhuming fresh corpses to sell was reasonably lucrative.
This is quite beyond the pale. You wouldn't invite divine retribution, sir.
Yes, well, I think I suffered in retribution enough. The Daily Circus eventually unearthed my name and put it in print. It caused me a great many headaches. In the end, I had to leave the university. This was the only paper with a bad grace to identify me unambiguously, I might add. Then I gave up on my dream of becoming a scientist, and it was all because of that newspaper article.
At the time, you were a student of the University of London who dreamt of becoming a scientist. However, this single newspaper article changed your entire life. So Mr. Asman used to be a newspaper journalist, did he? He did, my lord. In fact, it's a widely held belief that Asman managed to position himself at the heart of his criminal network, thanks to the many dubious connections he made during his time as reporter. So you had to give up on your dream and leave university. You lost everything. Eventually you found yourself working in the field of science, but only in the shadows. And all because of that article, written by Mr. Asman. Enough!
Stop this endless drivel about my life!
What? Explain yourself, Mr. Drebber!
Yes, it's true. I had to leave the university as a result of that article. But it was just the straw that broke the camel's back.
What do you mean?
Almost every student of science in the faculty was too poor to actually conduct any research. But they struggled with their hypotheses anyway. We all did, only to have them taken by vultures. Sooner or later, you knew your ideas would be stolen and patented by some rich or other after all. Good gracious. Making a name for yourself as a scientist in a climate like that was a miracle only a select few geniuses could ever hope to achieve. Personally, I wasn't one of those geniuses, so it was hardly a wrench. Being forced out of the university because of Logate was the best thing that could have happened to me!
Mr. Drebber, do you genuinely believe that?
Of course I do! Who's better placed to know whether or not I possess a talent for science than me?
I'm sorry to say, your words don't ring true at all.
Dare you!
And I have evidence to prove it.
Are you in a position to say anything about me? I don't know you from Adam. Fine. If you think you have evidence, go ahead. Show it. What could you possibly have to disprove the idea that I was happy to leave the university?
Take that!
Do you remember this, Mr. Drebber? We found it at your workshop.
Is that
a Royal Society trophy for excellence in science? What exactly is this trophy, Counsel? It's the greatest honor that can be bestowed on a young scientist, my lord. There is no higher accolade. It recognizes emerging talent and promises a bright future. Good gracious! Whoa. Your prospects for the future were excellent, weren't they, Mr. Drebber? Because even then, you were a genius in your field. But you lost everything. You had no more future. Your talents would go to waste. All as a result of this one newspaper article. I don't know when you realized who Mr. Asman was. But when it dawned on you that he was the same journalist who 10 years ago ruined your life. It's abundantly clear that you had no intention of forgiving the man. The truth is finally it's going to fold. Fine. Clearly this has run its course now.
What?
I admit it. All of it.
What? What are you doing?
It's exactly as the Japanese man said. I was coerced into going along with this man's plot to murder the victim. On the condition that he kept my dirty secret from 10 years ago.
Good Lord!
Dr. Sith! Do you realize what you're saying, woman? It's all true. That day, when I arrived at the Crystal Tower and saw the birdcage, my heart nearly stopped beating. That memory from a decade ago, done my best to bury deep inside myself. It's the professor again, staring me in the face. And then, before I had a chance to react, I noticed something else. There was a note tucked inside the model's jacket.
Dr. Sith, you will go along with my plan. From someone who knows the truth about what really happened that night 10 years ago.
All the instructions were there in the note. Every detail was meticulously written out. I had no choice but to do what it said. I made the necessary alterations to the scene and fabricated the autopsy report as instructed. There was really no other choice. It had to be done to protect the judiciary. Then why lie about the execution in the first place? I can only apologize now.
Why on earth would you buckle now?
Oh, there's no point in trying to hide it anymore, is there? I would have done anything to stop it coming out, even collaborate in a murder. But the great lie about that execution 10 years ago has been exposed. Whatever happens, I'm finished.
So then, Mr. Drebel,
What do you say to that? Your accomplice has admitted everything.
surely it goes without saying.
You admit your part in it too, then?
I admit nothing at all.
What?
Have you forgotten that the kinesis machine was ripped to shreds by an explosion? Short of me admitting to a crime, there's really no possible way for you to prove I did anything wrong.
Yeah. No!
Order!
Whatever this man says, I admit everything. He threatened to expose my secret, so I went along with his plan. And Lord von Zeeks, yes, I hope you'll accept my apologies. What happens next is in your hands, of course. What the hell was that all about? I've heard more than enough now. I hereby present the final findings of this court. This trial is not the proper forum in which to pursue the alleged wrongdoings of Mr. Drebber. The defendant is Professor Albert Harebrain. Very true. It had slipped my mind. Isn't he one of your closest friends? As the court has heard, Dr. Sith has admitted to the allegations brought by the defense, thereby absolving the defendant of any possible guilt.
You mean...
At the present time, it is the conclusion of this court that the defendant was not involved in any wrongdoing. Does the prosecution have any objection? None, my lord.
Oh, congratulations, Mr. Naruhodo! You've proven Professor Harebrain's innocence!
Without further ado then, the adjudication. Unless the prosecution or defense have any other matters to discuss. I don't know. This doesn't feel quite right. Why did Dr. Sith suddenly admit to it like that? Is everything alright, Mr. Naruhodo? Like you said before, the way the trial is set to end now, the judge will certainly deliver a verdict of not guilty. Is that really what we want? What the defense should be pushing for now is... Well, let's see. What's going on here?
Objection!
The defense objects to the trial ending at this time, my lord.
I beg your pardon.
We demand one final testimony. What? Did you realize I'm about to adjudicate in your favor? What are you playing at now, my Nipponese friend? Why Why would you want to obstruct the conclusion of the trial at this point? No defense lawyer in his right mind would do that!
Mr. Naruhodo, what exactly are you thinking?
The truth. The whole truth. And a way to bring it all out into the open.
Right.
Yes, in hindsight.
Ah yes, one word of warning before I go. If, in the course of the trial this afternoon, you perceive even a shadow of doubt about the truth, don't let it out of your sight. Pursue it like a dog with a bone. To the bitter end, you understand. Do not falter, whatever may come to pass.
I'm sure Mr. Sholmes knew. He must have deduced that this would happen. Yes, I'm here in court to advocate for my client and to secure an acquittal. Obviously. But that's not all. I believe that I have a duty to the court to pursue the whole truth of the case until every last detail is laid bare. And that is why the defense calls for further testimony from Dr. Sith.
Testimony from me?
About what? About the nature of your collaboration with Mr. Enoch Jabber. In case it's escaped your attention, I've already admitted to everything I did. The whole truth has already been revealed. So stop wasting everyone's time! As his lordship made plain, your client will get the acquittal you wanted for him. There's simply no point in protracting this business further with another tedious cross-examination.
Objection!
Pray forgive my careless handling of that hallowed bottle. I slipped. That's what you call it.
What is your objection, Lord Von Zieks?
The prosecution also calls for supplementary testimony from the witness.
Don't be stupid!
There is more to this case than has yet come to light. Then I will join my learned friend in pursuing the facts until the bitter end.
What? Lord Von Zieks.
This is most irregular, to say the least. However, as the prosecution also calls for it, I will uphold the request. Dr. Sith, you will testify for the court, explaining the full extent of your involvement. Very well. It all began at the scene when I saw the waxwork and the note tucked inside its jacket. The actual body of the victim, as indicated in the note's instructions, was beneath the experimentation stage. The body had to be arranged in certain ways to implicate the defendant, which was my job. I enlisted the help of the entire forensic investigation team to address the scene appropriately. The truth about the execution 10 years ago is a state secret of the highest level. I had to protect it. So I was right. The stage and the machine were specially designed for the deception. So it seems. And all meticulously prepared. You did well to see through it. You're a very shrewd boy. So kind of you to say.
What about this autopsy report then?
All I did was record the location of the body as being in the Crystal Tower instead of under the stage.
That's a terrible corruption!
Only my team were aware of the deceit, and then only under my explicit instructions. Nobody else at Scotland Yard knew anything about it, I assure you.
We must be thankful for small mercies, I suppose. Well, I believe that testimony has clarified everything. There's no particular need for a cross-examination, I would say.
No, I disagree.
I can't shake the feeling that something's wrong. Just look at that expression on Dr. Sith's face.
It's the defense's right to cross-examine any witness following testimony. What is it about you Japanese that makes you all so doggedly persistent?
Very well. If you so desire, counsel, proceed with the cross-examination.
Yes, my lord. It all began at the scene. Is that really the starting point? Hold on, let's see. Anything else? That's out in the open. Shoot, there's nothing else linking her to this. Well, except this. From what you described before, it sounds like the note was anonymous. Did you have any idea who was behind it? There are very few people in the know about what really happened 10 years ago to start with. But anyway, I'd never heard of this engineer, so no, I had no idea. Yet despite not knowing who was behind the plan, you went along with it. I had no choice. Protecting the professor's secret was my only concern. But the horse has bolted now, and the stable door will never shut again. Scotland Yard's reputation will be immeasurably damaged as a result of all this. Yes, thank you, Lord Von Zeeks. I'm well aware of that.
So, as I understand it, what you found in the birdcage was a waxwork model. Where then was the victim's body?
The actual body of the victim, as indicated. So you knew about the special construction of the stage used to carry out the trick then? It was quite obvious what had happened with the victim and the waxwork. And you switched the two over, didn't you? In other words, you recorded the victim's body as have been discovered in the Crystal Tower. And the waxwork? I wrapped it and sent it by carriage to the specified address at the specified time.
And why were you given such directions?
Presumably so it could be recovered by Drebber and returned to Madame to spell.
I see. And then you put the birdcage back on the experimentation stage.
Yes, although someone obviously made a mistake about which cage should go where. Thought I made it perfectly clear to the team, but still.
I suppose you were focused on the victim's body, that being a more important detail.
The body had to be arranged in certain ways to implicate the defendant, which was my job.
When you say arranged, I presume you mean with this?
Yes, the instructions in the engineer's note said something along the lines of fabricate some evidence to make it clear that Harebrain alone could have killed Asmund. He didn't die from the fall, did he? You mean that was your doing? Fetched Harebrain's ridiculous screwdriver from the stage and took it with me, alone, to the abyss under the stage where the birdcage had fallen. Alone, Doctor. I I didn't feel it would be appropriate to involve anybody else in that particular part of the deception. There was a void under the stage where I found the birdcage lying in the dirt. I approached it, leaning down, and slowly opened it up. Then, I took the screwdriver in both hands and plunged it into the man's chest. And then you noted that in your fake autopsy report as a fictitious cause of death. Exactly. So, the actual cause of death was the trauma resulting from the 30-foot drop. Well, if he was dead at that point, why did you bother killing him again? I mean, I guess you really wanted to implicate the defendant. What is it, Mr. Sato? Something about Dr. Sith's last statement. It's playing on my mind, that's all. Yes, mine too. Dr. Sith! There's really no need to shout. I can hear you perfectly well. The defense calls for you to add what you just said to your formal testimony. Oh, which part? What I want her to supplement her testimony with is... Let's see what she did to the fact. The real cause of death. The real cause of death, I think, is questionable. The real cause of death being the fall of 30 feet. That part! Fine, if that's what you want. Stop yelling, please! The prosecution concurs. Very well. You will supplement your testimony now, witness. If you wish, my lord. The actual cause of death was the neck trauma.
Hold it!
I'm quite sure of that. It was as a result of a broken neck. Yes, as a professional, that was more than apparent. You never know just by looking at the photograph of the victim though, would you? Oh, that's very true. Obviously not. Which is precisely why coroners are needed to determine the actual facts. Yes, assuming they can be trusted. There's no point calling her assessment into question without evidence. Let's get back to the testimony. Very well. I listed the whole... Hold on a second. Okay, wait, I want to see if we can get the other statement. I want to see what the other one... If she says something else. Can I get that? Have her change it. I want to see what else she says. Oh, shoot! Wait, let me... Dr. Sith, what you said before about what you did to the victim's body, I believe that may be significant. So could you change your supplementary statement to explain that instead? Very well. I stood over the victim's corpse and where it lay in the toppled cage and plunged the screwdriver into the chest. If it lay there, then how do you explain this mark? It's almost as if he was killed standing up.
Objection!
Of What a nasty feeling. But this inconsistency points to an extremely uncomfortable truth. What on earth is the matter, Counsel? Have you lost your tongue? I apologize, my lord. Dr. Sith, that last statement of yours is just one point. That seems to defy explanation. Out with him, my learned friend. There's an obvious inconsistency between your description and this photograph, which shows the victim in the birdcage following the events that led to his death.
Objection!
The court has already examined that photograph in depth. There's nothing we can learn from it.
Objection!
Yes, we have already considered it, that's true. But we now know the facts to be different. What do you mean? I believe we should let the defense explain. Where in this photograph would we see the alleged inconsistency with the witness's statement?
Take that!
Look closely at the bloodstain on the victim's chest. It clearly extends in a downwards direction, towards the man's feet. And why is that significant, Counsel? If the victim was stabbed moments before the kinesis machine was set in motion, that's entirely expected. Of course! No, that's not what happened! Exactly, my lord. Dr. Sith made it very clear in her testimony just now. At the point at which she stole Professor Hairbrain's screwdriver and stabbed the victim was after the grand deception was set in motion, but the birdcage had fallen below the stage out of sight. From the shape of it, it's clear that the birdcage would have fallen on his side after the 30-foot drop. And if the victim had really been stabbed whilst inside the birdcage in that position, the blood from the wound would have spread out equally in all directions. For it to have formed the longitudinal appearance we see in the picture, it's inconceivable. Given that the victim's blood seeped vertically downwards from the wound, it must be the case that when you stabbed Mr. Asman, he was standing up. In short, Dr. Sith, your latest testimony was a total fabrication. Ah! I knew it. I was right. Now I've identified that contradiction. There's only one way to explain the facts. We've all been under a great misapprehension here. What? What sort of misapprehension? Dr. Sith, you claim you were coerced into helping Mr. Drebber as a result of the note he left in the waxwork. You claim that you made changes to the scene of the crime to implicate the defendant. You claim that you authored a fake autopsy report to cover your tracks. But one of those claims is an out-and-out lie. Because the question of what the bloodstain really tells us has only one possible answer. If that is the case, what is it, man? Counsel, you've clearly struck upon a revelation. Now tell the court what it is. Which part of Dr. Sith's story is shown to be a lie? Wait, is the autopsy report the lie? The stabbing of the victim. The autopsy report. Wait, is the autopsy? Oh, shoot. The way she stabbed the victim? She said she stabbed him lying down, but he wasn't. The answer is very simple if you consider the sequence of events. I had to overthink that for a moment, sorry. If when the victim was stabbed, the blood from the wound seeped downwards as it did, we can be sure that the victim must have either been sitting or standing upright at the time. But as you rightly pointed out, the birdcage would have fallen on his side where it fell beneath the stage. Yes, it would, which tells us that the victim must have been in that position of his own accord.
Objection!
That's impossible! The man was dead, remember! Was he? No! That's the misapprehension! When the birdcage fell from the stage into the void below, it must have hit the ground with considerable force. Oh. But Mr. Asmund didn't die in the fall. Probably lost consciousness for a while, but when he came around, he got to his feet to climb out of the cage. Just as Dr. Sith appeared. If the victim was in fact alive at that point in time, it changes everything. Mr. Odi Asma's killer wasn't the defendant, Professor Albert Hairbrain. Nor was it the mastermind behind the stage trickery, Mr. Enoch Drebber. It was you, Dr. Courtney Sith. Order! Can this possibly be true? Have you been taking me for a fool? It was you, wasn't it? You killed him! You hoped that by admitting to being an accomplice in Mr. Drebber's scheme, the trial would end before you were accused of a far worse crime. Cold-blooded murder. Oh, dude, shut up! You're so desperate now you're making all of this up! As if I would do something like that! I assure you, the defense is not desperate, Doctor. Mr. Nuttleholder established the fact using evidence and logic alone. Ha! Logic! Don't make me laugh. Sadly, your logic has a gaping hole in it. What do you mean? I'd have thought it was obvious. A motive, boy! You're lacking a motive! What possible reason would I have to kill Mr. Asmund? Asmund was involved in any number of criminal activities, from coercion to theft to murder. But there is no known connection to Dr. Sith there. I'm rather relieved to say it does seem somewhat far-fetched. True, there's no obvious motive. But there's still something in the back of my mind. I feel sure I've seen something somewhere that hints at why the coroner might have done this. Yes, I might have tampered with the crime scene and concocted a fake report. But murdering someone for no reason is a very different story. No, when you question what possible reason you could have for wanting to kill Mr. Asmund, something did come to mind. What? What is it, counsel? Enlighten the court! Yes, we saw it yesterday, didn't we? Something that seemed strange, but we had no reason to suspect it at the time. There's a particular object that explains why Dr. Sith would have wanted to kill Mr. Asmund. It's a scalpel, or rather, scalpels.
Did you say scalpels?
It would appear that word has struck a chord, Doctor.
Come on, out with it!
It was yesterday when we visited your laboratory. Look at this big, thick book here. Thick.
Oh, it appears to have been an accounting ledger. It's a record of the forensic investigation team spending, I think.
Huh? What is it?
It's clear that the team purchases various equipment and supplies on a monthly basis, but... well, one entry seems rather strange.
Really? In what way?
They're buying 500 scalpels every month!
$500 scalpels a month! At first, I wondered what on earth you could be using that many scalpels for. But actually, I realize now it's not the scalpels themselves that are significant. It's the money for them, disappearing every month from the department's accounts. Asman's criminal organization relied heavily on extortion for its funding. Tracing the money from the forensic investigation team's account to find where it was going would be extremely straightforward. 10 years ago, when Mr. Asman was still a journalist and wrote this article about Mr. Drebber, he may well have stumbled upon information as he was researching the story. Information relating to Dr. Sith's darkest secret that he would use to rack money from her for the next decade.
Darkest secret? Good Lord! You mean...
I don't know what happened on the night of that execution 10 years ago, but clearly the opportunity to rid yourself of that menace was too tempting to pass up. So, in the end, you weren't coerced at all, were you? You did it entirely of your own free will. You stabbed Mr. Asman in the heart with all your might, to silence the blackmailer who knew your dark secrets forever. You'll never understand. None of you. What we've had to keep covered up all these long years. As very little of the machine remains after it was ripped apart by the bomb. The truth of this case can never be properly established unless you speak out. And if you decide not to, it's very possible that Courtney Sith will escape punishment for her crimes.
Please, sir, own up to what you've done and tell the court the truth about what happened.
10 years ago, you told the truth. You were robbed of a bright and successful future as a result. I can certainly understand your bitterness and your consternation now. However, this is surely the chance you've been waiting for, to sever the hold that fate's had over you all these years.
Super high voltage instantaneous kinesis. I mean, really?
It's the outer-brain mock scientists that are the worst, you know. They don't recognize the fact that they don't have talent. They can't even get that right.
And so they end up chasing impossible dreams, having unbridled faith in their abilities. They go on and on about their wonderful hypotheses, stupid eyes shining like a little child's. They make me sick. I can't abide the foolishness.
Careful, Mr. Drebber.
I was particularly pleased with the kinesis machine. It made for quite a show, didn't it?
So you admit it? You admit that it was nothing more than a sham made for the purpose of killing the victim?
Yes, I admit it. I did it all in the name of revenge.
Revenge for the future that Mr. Asmer's article had deprived of you 10 years earlier. But the revenge you sought didn't stop at Asman, did it? Which is where that very particular waxwork comes in. Yes, I see.
The condemned convict that you saw rising from the grave in Lowgate Cemetery 10 years ago. If your account of those events was all true.
And obviously Scotland Yard can't afford to acknowledge what had happened. Even if it meant discrediting a bright young man and crushing any future career he might have had. So your plan required that you abduct that particular waxwork model in order to exact your revenge on Scotland Yard as well. Or on Dr. Sith, to be precise.
It was a year ago. By some extraordinary twist of fate, Asman turned up at my workshop. He didn't remember who I was, of course. He just wanted to employ my services as an engineer. And he happened to have a paper with him. An article on the front page caught my eye. About the coroner who'd handled that bogus autopsy being appointed head of a new forensic team. When I learned that news, my cognitive process is starting to devise the plan. A horrid tale. He robbed me on my future, so I wanted to use the man's own vials against him. For revenge. And have that rotten Scotland Yard eating out of my hand at the same time. I wanted them all to suffer the same humiliation I had to suffer!
Your actions against those who ruined your future were justified as revenge. At least, to yourself. Certainly, no one has the right to destroy another's prospects, especially for purely selfish gain. And yet, in carrying out your plan, you did exactly that to someone else, didn't you?
Did I?
Professor Harebrain's only crime was passion for his hypothesis. He had no compunction about sacrificing his future to effect your revenge. You knew that he would be forever branded a failure and a fraud. Perhaps life treated you unfairly 10 years ago, and others' misconduct left your life in tatters. But remember this, your own actions resulted in exactly the same thing for another perfectly innocent young man. Lord Von Zeeks, what of Dr. Sith? An immediate warrant for her arrest has been granted, and she's been remanded in custody, my lord. I presume she will face trial in the coming days, along with Mr. Drabot.
A most regrettable situation indeed. She's made great contributions to her profession over the years. It really is a hard truth to swallow. However, that is a topic for some future occasion.
For now, Professor Hairbrain. Yes. It seems there was a great deal more to your experiment than you realized. However, I think we can assume now that all the sordid details have been brought to light. This has been a very long and profound trial, but I'm pleased to say you are absolved of all guilt. This whole experience has taught me a very great but painful lesson. Me, this dedicated scientist, this devotee of natural philosophy. I've been selfish and self-centered, and above all, a fool. Professor, I've spent my life thinking of nothing by my research, misguidedly believing that I could do whatever I set my mind to, despite my lack of talent. And the worst of it is, in the process, I've caused others pain and misery. Others who are far greater people than I. No, Professor. That's not true. Don't tar yourself with the same brush as Drebber. What happened was his doing and his alone. His outcome is his fate, not yours. You're not to blame in any way. For God's sakes. The derision with which he referred to you earlier. Calling you a fool. Talentless even. The man has no idea. To believe in yourself and work your fingers to the bone to realize your dreams. That's laudable, not laughable. No one has the right to deride another for such choices! Thank you, Barack. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Yes, my lord. It is this court's expectation that you find the defendant not guilty of the charge for which he stands accused. I presume there are no objections? None for me, my lord. Certainly not. This trial has really made me think, but this is the right decision. It's all been proven methodically and rigorously. I have no misgivings whatsoever.
Oh, what's that? He's done, is he? It's all over.
I don't know what's become of the yard these days. I don't recognise the place. Very well. In that case, I hereby pronounce the defendant not guilty! Woo! Court is adjourned. It's over. That was some trial. Professor, what a splendid outcome, isn't it? Oh, it is! Congratulations, Professor Hairbrain! Mr. Naruhodo. Mr. Sato. I am truly beside myself with gratitude! How can I ever thank you enough? I'm just glad it's been cleared up. That you realize you were just caught up in a bad situation. If I had the research grant money, I'd give the whole lot to you, every penny. Well, that's very kind, but I'm just a student, so we don't need any financial reward. Your acquittal is more than enough. Oh dear, what can I do? How about this? As a memento! The paper about my hypothesis is inside! Well, just as a memento then. Thank you. I've been wondering, Professor, about what you're going to do now. Oh, why? Yes! What am I going to do? My hypothesis and my great machine lie in ruins. But still, it's been too long since I was last in London, so perhaps I will enjoy some sightseeing. I must explore the great exhibition whilst I'm here too, and see if new inspiration hits me. Oh yes, that's a wonderful idea. I can't allow that. For God's sakes, what are you doing in here? The rug. I'm sorry you had to go through that, Albert. Well, if I'm honest, it was terrifying. You were like a great demon behind your bench there, snarling down on your prey. You're one of the few true friends I have. Couldn't leave it to anybody else to handle the prosecution or the defense. Sorry, or the defense. Did I just hear that right? I always knew that you had my best interests at heart. Don't worry. How about you show me around while I'm here in town? It's been a long time since we left university. We have a lot to catch up on. Listen, Albert. In a few days, your acquittal will be made official. When that happens, you must head straight to Dover. I'll accompany you. What? From there, you'll cross the channel and make your way back to Germany. I've already purchased the tickets. No! Hold on a minute, Barack! What about the great exhibition? This is the chance of a lifetime for me. I want to look around. No sightseeing, Albert. Give up on the idea. Sometimes it's hard to see any warmth in those eyes, Barack. Lord von Zieks? What's all this about? A necessary precaution. Yes, I think I understand. You do? Iris told me that when you've met Lord von Zieks at his office some days ago, he asked how Mr. Natsume was doing. Yes, that's right. I remember being surprised at the time. I think it was nice of him to ask. The point is, Mr. Natsume is still alive and well. Even though it's been more than 6 months now since he stood trial with the Reaper as the prosecutor. Okay, but what about Gino? You mean the Reaper's influence doesn't stretch overseas? Those in the Reaper's sights meet their ends days or sometimes months after their acquittal. That's been the pattern up to now. But of course, we know that both Mr. Natsume and Gino were completely innocent. True. And perhaps that governs the Reaper's actions. The truly innocent are spared. But I don't want to take any chances with a close personal friend. Barack! With the mustache Nipponese, this man should leave the country without delay. That's why I'm packing him off to Germany at once! Right! Does your friend-shaped package get any say in it? Goodness! Was it your intention all along then, Lord von Zieks? In court, where people think of him as a Reaper, this man seems absolutely merciless. And yet, sometimes I feel as though I don't understand him at all. It's time to go, Albert. Back to the prison for the time being. Yes, alright. Well then, Mr. Naruhodo. Well, thank you so much for everything.
Not at all, Professor. It was a pleasure getting to know you. Best wishes, Professor Harebrain. Well, once the dust has settled, you must come and visit me in Germany. Anyway, goodbye for now.
Now, my Nipponese friend. Yes! I thought you'd gone too. Oh yeah, where is Kenji? We have matters to discuss. Can you spare me some time? You want to talk with me? I'll be waiting in the courtroom in 10 minutes. Why 10 minutes? Can't we go now? Well, that was strange. For some reason, I didn't get that sense of impending doom as he walked away this time. The enigma, Baroque von Ziegs. What does he want to discuss, I wonder? The answer awaits in the courtroom, I suppose. Here goes then. Oh, hey, dude. So, are you satisfied? You saved a guileless scientist from a great injustice. Yes, I think so. I'm relieved, at least, that the man's innocence could be proven. Anyway, I imagine you've been wondering where my animosity towards you Nipponese comes from. Well, at first I thought you just didn't like me. I imagined you see me as a pretentious child from an unimportant land who had no business being here. But now, I think differently. You clearly know our ways, so I would guess that some specific incident led to your thorough dislike of my race. Will you tell me what happened? Please? The Professor. Thought I'd never hear that name in this courtroom again, to be honest. You took your brother's line. Clint. My brother was Clinton von Ziegs. 16 years ago, when I was still just in my teens. He was already the director of prosecutions and a key member of the judiciary. I looked up to him. He was everything I aspired to be. He was involved in the establishment of justice systems in foreign countries as well. There were exchange programs between Britain and other nations then too, to share knowledge and ideas. As part of one of those programs, 3 judicial students came to Britain from your homeland, the Empire of Japan. If it was 16 years ago, then one of them could have been my father. Of course, I remember Dr. Mikotoba well. I had no idea. I was a minor at the time, training at the prosecutor's office. One day, Clint introduced me to the 3 visiting Nipponese. So, you've actually met my father. He and his colleagues were polite and amicable. They were adept at their work and exacting in their standards. It was my first encounter with the Nipponese spirit, and it made a very great impression upon me. But 6 years later, that's when it happened. The investigation was going nowhere. There were no suspects even. Just an ever-growing list of victims. And in the end, my brother became one of them. The last, in fact, before the case was finally resolved. I'm so sorry, Lord Von Zieks. Truly. Clint was always ready to put his life on the line for justice anyway. So he wouldn't have wanted it any other way. He's lost his life to the killer, but it was his victory in the end. For me personally, though, it was a great loss. I found myself in a very dark place indeed. When I finally found out the killer's identity, the reason why no one had been able to catch the man sooner ceased to be such a mystery. He'd been hiding in plain sight the whole time. In plain sight? Are you aware of political events 10 years ago? It was a period of extremely sensitive diplomacy between the British and Japanese empires. A new treaty was being forged, I think. Correct. The Anglo-Japanese Treaty of Friendship and Navigation was being concluded. The leaders of both countries were deep in extensive political discussions. Which is why this particular killer's appearance in court was conducted as a closed trial. If the British public had known the identity of the killer, not only would the treaty have been in jeopardy, but our two nations could have very well have ended up at war. What? A war? Between Britain and Japan? That would mean... You mean to say the professor was... Hi, editing me here. I've chosen the following cutscene to be played in Japanese because there's something I want to point out once it's finished. There will be English subtitles, and I will switch the audio back for the rest of the game. Anyway, enjoy!
今日審理が終わった時、時が来た。そう思った。貴公たちがこの恐るべき殺人鬼と対面する時がな。あの老人形の館の女主人から仮面の鍵を借り受けた。その目でしかと確かめるが10年前の真実。
これがプロフェッサーの正体。
その通り。
今まで考えたこともありませんでした。英国犯罪史上最悪の事件、その殺人鬼の正体が日本人だったなんて。
待ってください。この面影、どこかで見たことがある。そんな気がいたします。
Kenji!
父上。あ、葬儀。僕の親友、麻生木一馬。1年の時を経て今、全ての記憶を取り戻して。
Oh my god, he has a forehead!
目の前に立っていた。
Yo, what the hell, dude? I thought you died!
なるほど。久しぶりだな。
礼を言う。私の代わりに友をここに導いてくれた。
カズマ様。
やっぱり生きていたんだな、アソギ。
貴様にも礼を言わねばならない。何しろそいつを守ってくれたのだからな。
アソーギの家に代々伝わる名刀、カルマ。日本を出発するとき、あいつが身に帯びていた。日本人の魂であり、いつもそばに置いておきたいと。そしてあの事件が起こって、僕は千里さんからこの刀を託されたんだ。お前が残した思いとともに。こいつがあるといつもお前が見守ってくれている気がしていた。
やっとたどり着きました、父上。
父上、まさかお前知っていたのか。その面影だけど、とても信じられない。殺人鬼の正体が麻生木一馬の父だったなんて。
カズマ様。
なるほど。貴様と積もる話はあるが、今はその時ではない。また会おう。
麻生木一馬は僕たちを残して法廷から出て行った。
Okay, first of all, not fun Zeke's being hilariously accommodating after constant Nipponese slander? Anyway, besides the obvious surname basis thing going on, Kazuma refers to Ryunosuke as Kisama, which is one of probably a million Japanese words meaning you in English. I'm pretty sure it's rude in today's context, though perhaps not when this game took place in the late 1800s? Well, anyway, I just thought this was interesting and hilarious. That's all. Okay, carry on. And Von Zeeks is just chilling. So he's the living after image of the man who took my brother's life, is he? Yes, Kazuma Asogi. My best friend. 3 months ago, when Lord Strongheart introduced us, I had an inkling there was something there. Some connection. But why did Lord Strongheart do that? Why did he make Kazuma Lord Von Zeeks' apprentice? And when he was suffering amnesia too? The man was apprehended, even executed. But his legacy just won't die. That's the sad truth. Anyway, that's all I had to say. I thank you for meeting with me as I asked.
10 years ago. My grandmother took me to the railway station. We were there to meet my father from the train. For me, it was the first time I'd ever seen him. Oh, Sato-san, all this is tied up with painful memories for her too. She's never talked about this with me before. No. It took time to adjust to having father around, but just when I was starting to get used to it, he called me into his study one day. He told me that a great friend of his had passed away in London, and that the friend had left behind a son, a boy 7 years my senior. Father told me the boy had made a promise to his late father, so he was studying to become a defense lawyer. I wanted to help, so I studied to become a qualified judicial assistant. As I'm sure you've worked out, the young man's name is Kazuma Asogi. So you see, that's how he and I met.
For a brief moment, my great friend had returned, only to disappear again all too soon. But in that fleeting encounter, something stirred. Something that had been dormant for a long time, as if great wheels had been set in motion. I could almost hear them creaking into life. In some ways, it was the end of a chapter, but in many, it was the start of a new one.